Hello and welcome to the first episode in our SD-WAN and SASE video series titled The Fluid Network, where I discuss some key architectural changes in network services with one of our network experts, Stefan Crome. In the past, the perfect answer to both corporate connectivity and security was a centralized architecture, with regionalized data centers and associated hub-and-spoke connectivity. But now, with the home office boom, the growing dominance of the cloud, and the increasing volume of IoT devices, this legacy design may no longer be fit for purpose. Once again, the network is taking center stage in these strategy conversations as either a key business enabler that truly unleashes the power of the cloud, or indeed a fundamental blocker to your digital transformation journey. So with that in mind, welcome, Stefan. Hello.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me.
For a long time, Stefan, MPLS was considered the answer to all questions about enterprise network connectivity for global businesses. If MPLS is so effective at this connectivity, why the shift towards the internet?
Well, that's correct, Tim. MPLS has been around for a long time, for about 2 decades. It's been serving the enterprise connectivity world very well for a long time, replacing ATM frame relay in the early 2000s. And now we come to a different application environment as applications move into the cloud. That actually means that we don't have a centralized architecture where all the applications are hosted in the data center, but a distributed architecture where applications are hosted in the data center, but are also moving to several different clouds. And that actually requires a network architecture that caters for this new setup. SD-WAN is actually bringing these advantages. It supplies a network architecture that allows for accessing applications in the cloud in a much more dynamic way as the more static MPLS could actually do in the past. Plus, we also have to consider the improved security features that we need to have in order to secure applications as they move into the cloud. So we don't have the classic security parameter any longer, but the perimeter disappears and is replaced by a distributed security architecture with edge security, but also several layers of security and security capabilities that move into the cloud as applications also move into the cloud. And last but not least, we need to consider the much improved quality of the public internet, and that particularly applies to the use of the public internet for local breakouts and also for catering for remote users, road warriors, employees working from home, from hotels that need to use the public internet to access all of the enterprise's applications. So leveraging the capabilities of the public internet is another important factor that requires a new architecture.
Thanks, Stefan. So with most of the workforce still being remote and obviously the majority of applications then in the cloud, what special requirements does this place on corporate networks?
Well, today corporate networks need to become a lot more dynamic. And this is actually what SD-WAN provides. So we need to be able to cater for remote users who work as road warriors or from home or from hotels. But we also need to be able to shift sites around in a much easier way that we could with a more static MPLS networks. The other important feature that SD-WAN networks bring to the table is the capability of dynamic path management as well as virtualization. Dynamic path management means we take advantage of several different path options, either via the public internet or via a private IPVPN core, which is still required for most global corporate networks. The other aspect I mentioned before is network function virtualization. And specifically when it comes to security, network function virtualization allows for the hosting of virtualized security appliances on top of the network architecture, which means also that the network becomes a lot more dynamic and security and network architectures can actually be merged into each other, which is a requirement, as we've seen before, with applications moving to the cloud.
The security is becoming even more of a key driver as more businesses go through that decentralization of those services. So with that in mind, why is SD-WAN so effective at helping here?
Because SD-WAN allows for the hosting of various security applications, various layers of security, and another important aspect that is just emerging is the SASE approach, the Secure Access Edge, which is a feature that merges the security applications as they're hosted in the cloud along with the network architecture. So SASE is the buzzword of the day, brought about by Gartner in 2019, and today we're actually seeing the first SASE implementations with various SD-WAN vendors and service providers, and the security is more and more moving towards SASE, away from what we've seen in the early days of SD-WAN with simple network function virtualization of next generation firewalls.
So, Stefan, SASE, as mentioned there, is a real buzzword that we see in the industry at the moment, right? So, with many seeing that as the next evolution of SD-WAN, how do we see SASE as Deutsche Telekom?
Well, Tim, about 2 years ago, a lot of people were still discussing whether SASE was just a term coined by Gartner and the SASE hype would go away, which it did not. We find that SASE is a real useful security implementation, meaning that we can merge the network and the security architecture with each other. So we have security capabilities moving into the cloud, and that's what SASE is actually all about. So we merge the network and the security fabric into one single connectivity and security solution. And this is actually something that is revolutionizing the network industry in a way that we have not seen for the past decades.
If a business decentralizes their network, adopts more internet access and cloud-based apps, obviously, and then adds SASE to the mix, they've got it all sorted, right? I mean, this sounds easy.
Well, Tom, it does sound easy, but many enterprise ICT departments had to discover that it's not quite that easy. And one of the main reasons for that is actually the lack of standardization in the SD-WAN world. We counted 76 different SD-WAN vendors, all not standardized. There's no such thing as an ATM forum or the IETF for SD-WAN. There is the MAF70 standard SD-WAN service attributes, but this is really a very high-level interoperating standard. So we have non-standardized solutions, and that requires a lot of experience by the service provider to implement and to operate an SD-WAN solution.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I think it's with that kind of standardization in mind, that's where our vendor agnostic consultative approach comes in, right? So we've seen recently several of our recent customers valuing that vendor agnostic approach. But why do you see this as a differentiator in the market?
It is a differentiator because many ICT departments are still confused by the different types of SD-WAN solutions that are actually around. SD-WAN vendors come from many different backgrounds. Some come from the WAN optimization space, others come from the security space, and they all have different pros and cons. So vendor agnostic means that we're able to differentiate between these different pros and cons and choose the solution which fits best for a particular enterprise communication purpose.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Stefan. It's been really insightful as always, and hopefully our audience have already learned something from these discussions. So in summary, what would you say are the most important points when it comes to optimizing your services with Network of the Future in mind?
Well, Tom, I guess the most important point is actually analyzing the application landscape and understanding the pain points that an enterprise wide area network is made for. So we need to really understand the application landscape in order to size the bandwidth correctly and also to get the network architecture right. And for that, it takes an experienced service provider who can actually leverage the pros and cons of the different wide area networking service providers and vendors.
Thank you, Stefan. So in summary, don't underestimate some of these key differences and indeed how important your network is at enabling this digital transformation journey for your businesses. If you get it right, network is a key enabler for your digital transformation. If you get it wrong, well, nobody wants to get it wrong. So I hope this has been useful, and please join me in our next installment where we will discuss SD-WAN and its capabilities to blend mobile and fixed line connectivity seamlessly into the same business fabric with additional capabilities for optimization. With that in mind, Stefan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, for the interview.
And looking forward to our audience joining us for the next episode. Thank you.